The story begins with a man standing on a table. He speaks. The scene shifts to the original Trojan horse, buried beneath the sand and surrounded by the ruins of Troy. Soon, dozens of men pull the giant horse from the sand and carry it to the temple of Athena, celebrating the end of the war. The story is suddenly interrupted when Queen Penelope asks them to stop. But her son, Telemachus, explains that these stories give the people hope while they wait for Odysseus to return. Antinous, he claims it's time for Penelope to choose a new husband because Ithaca needs a king. Telemachus immediately disagrees, insisting that his father is still alive and will return. A traveler soon arrives at the palace, and Telemachus eagerly questions him, hoping for any news about his missing father. The next morning, Telemachus trains with his mentor, Eumaeus. Even though Eumaeus is blind, he easily sees that Telemachus relies too much on speed. Eumaeus shares stories about Odysseus, explaining that true strength comes from wisdom, not reckless attacks. Victory belongs to the one who thinks ahead, not the one who swings first. The lesson works. Afterward, Eumaeus reveals another story from the past. When Agamemnon gathered soldiers for the Trojan War, the warriors were chosen by lottery. Antinous was selected, but he secretly switched his stone with another young man's, sending someone else to fight. Back in the palace, Antinous confidently demands that Penelope choose a new husband, believing he deserves to become the next king of Ithaca. He has promised the suitors that she will make her choice only after the cloth is finished. She doesn't want to marry again, but she knows the kingdom needs stability. She then remembers Odysseus's final request before leaving for Troy. If he had not returned by the time Telemachus became a man, she was to remarry, for the sake of Ithaca and its people. Telemachus wants to travel to Menelaus and finally learn what really happened to his father. But leaving the palace would be dangerous.
That same night, Odysseus's loyal dog Argos is nearing the end of his life. One of the suitors nearly kills the old dog, but Telemachus steps in to protect him. Unfortunately, Telemachus is no match for a grown warrior. Antinous has no problem with that. He openly boasts that he'll gladly kill Telemachus and then marry Penelope. Realizing time is running out, Telemachus secretly leaves Ithaca at dawn with a small crew of loyal companions to search for his father. Meanwhile, Odysseus is visited by the goddess Athena, who tells him it's finally time to remember who he is and return home. But Calypso refuses to let him go, keeping his mind clouded with the power of the lotus flower. Then, memories begin to return. Odysseus remembers the day his men finally received the order they had waited years to hear. But before long, they ran out of supplies. Despite stopping at several islands, they found nothing they needed. Eventually, they landed on what appeared to be an uninhabited island. The only living thing they spotted was a sheep. Following it led them to a cave filled with an enormous flock. Then disaster struck. A gigantic creature sealed the cave entrance behind them. In the dim firelight, they finally saw Polyphemus, a monstrous cyclops who casually grabbed several of Odysseus's men and devoured them alive. Once the monster fell asleep, the survivors had a chance to kill him. But if they did, no one would be able to move the massive boulder blocking the cave, leaving them trapped forever. Instead, Odysseus came up with a smarter plan. The next morning, his men disguised themselves among the sheep by covering themselves with straw. The trick worked, allowing them to slip past the Cyclops and escape the cave unnoticed. But before leaving, Odysseus couldn't resist one final strike. Seeing Polyphemus mocking the bodies of his fallen men, he shot an arrow straight into the Cyclops' eye. The enraged monster chased them all the way to their ship, but they managed to escape. Unfortunately, Polyphemus was the son of Poseidon. Throughout the night, they could hear the Cyclops begging the god of the sea for revenge. Telemachus arrives at the palace of Menelaus, the brother of Agamemnon, hoping he knows what became of Odysseus. Menelaus reveals that the idea for the Trojan horse came from Odysseus himself.
The Greek soldiers hid inside it for days, while the Trojan army inspected the mysterious gift. It took the Trojans 7 days to drag the enormous horse into the city. During that time, the men trapped inside endured unbearable heat, exhaustion, and even the stench of comrades who died before the plan could unfold. Finally, under the cover of night, the horse was placed beside Athena's temple.
About 50 exhausted warriors climbed out, silently eliminated every guard in their path, and opened the city gates for Agamemnon's army. It was Odysseus and his unmatched skill with the bow that bought those precious seconds, allowing the gates to open. Menelaus admits that the last time he saw Odysseus was on the beach after the victory. Then Helen interrupts, revealing a tragic truth. Agamemnon, the great king, he was murdered by his own wife and her lover, who sought revenge after he sacrificed their daughter for power and glory. Back in Odysseus's journey, Poseidon's wrath, the sea turned against them. Violent storms battered their ships for days before they finally reached another shore. As they explored the forest, they spotted what looked like a man. But when the figure turned around, they realized it was an enormous child. The giant boy screamed and ran into the mist. Moments later, an army of silver-skinned giants emerged from the fog. With a single swing, they could slice a man in half. Odysseus and his crew had walked straight into an ambush. Realizing their swords were useless against these monsters, Odysseus ordered an immediate retreat. The Lastrygonians overturned entire ships with their bare hands and slaughtered his men with terrifying ease. As painful as it was to leave so many men behind, sailing away wasn't an option either. Their supplies were nearly gone, and finding another place to gather food could take weeks. So Odysseus made one more gamble. His crew returned to shore, climbed into the hills, past countless wild animals that strangely ignored them, and eventually arrived at a lonely cottage belonging to a mysterious woman named Circe. She welcomes the sailors with soup and wine, but with every bite something horrifying begins to happen. One by one, the men transform into pigs. After killing one of Circe's servants, Odysseus discovers the victim was actually a human.
Realizing something is terribly wrong, he rushes back to the cottage, but he's already too late. Circe calmly invites him inside and places a bowl of hot food in front of him. Just before taking a bite, Odysseus notices his first officer's ring inside the bread bowl and immediately realizes the pigs are actually his men. Before he can react, Circe attacks, pressing a dagger against his throat. She declares that all men are pigs and claims his crew simply became what they truly were. Odysseus gains the upper hand and grabs the magical bird-shaped charm hanging around her neck. Terrified, Circe begs him not to destroy it because it represents her sister. The two strike a deal. Odysseus promises to leave peacefully without taking anything, and in return, Circe restores his crew to their human forms. She admits that Odysseus's first officer treated her with kindness, and that his crew was nothing like the cruel men who had harmed her family in the past. Odysseus asks for the way home. Circe warns that they have wandered too far. The only way to earn the sea's favor again is to sail west and perform a blood sacrifice in the land of the dead. Days later, Odysseus and his men arrive at the dark shore, carrying 2 sheep. Following Circe's instructions, they dig a trench and fill it with the animal's blood. Odysseus remembers Circe's final warning: only he is destined to return home. None of his crew will survive. But Odysseus refuses to accept the god's decision. Soon, spirits begin emerging from the darkness. Among them is Senna, the young soldier who died outside the Trojan horse. He reveals Antinous' betrayal. Antinous bribed him with promises to help his family, but instead sacrificed him for his own survival. Senna explains that this is where all warriors who die in battle come to rest. Even worse, Antinous plans to kill Telemachus and seize the throne of Ithaca. Before disappearing, Senna gives Odysseus one final instruction. Once he reaches home, he must continue sailing west until he reaches solid land. Next, the spirit of Agamemnon drinks from the blood and offers a warning of his own. When Odysseus finally returns home, he should not expect a hero's welcome. Instead, he should return in disguise. Agamemnon recalls how he was welcomed home with honor, bathed, fed, and treated like a king, only to have his own wife slit his throat in revenge for sacrificing their daughter during the war. The final spirit tells Odysseus to sail southwest, where he will face the deadly sirens. Even if he survives their song, he will still have to choose between Charybdis, the monstrous whirlpool that destroys everything in its path, or Scylla, the beast that claims 6 lives. Odysseus already has a plan for the sirens. He will seal his crew's ears with wax so they cannot hear the deadly song. Back in Ithaca, Antinous asks Penelope to marry him. He claims he has loved her since they were young and promises never to force her into anything. But he insists Ithaca needs a king now more than ever. Moments after leaving her room, one of the servants rushes to Antinous with shocking news. Telemachus is gone. He has secretly sailed away to meet Menelaus and search for his father. Antinous immediately orders his men to prepare an ambush. Telemachus must be killed before he returns, ensuring no one will ever challenge his claim to the throne. Meanwhile, Telemachus continues learning from Menelaus. He trains with the bow and hears warnings about the dangers threatening Greece from across the sea. Menelaus tells him the truth. Ithaca cannot survive much longer without a king. Now Telemachus must make a choice, claim the throne himself, or step aside and allow his mother to marry another man. The story returns to Odysseus and his crew as they approach the island of the Sirens. Odysseus orders everyone to seal their ears with wax so they cannot hear the sirens' deadly song. He tells his men to tie him tightly to the mast because he wants to become the first man to hear the sirens' voices and survive. Moments later, beautiful women appear among the rocks, singing with irresistible voices. Driven mad by the song, Odysseus desperately struggles against his ropes, screaming for his men to let him go. One sailor can't resist his curiosity. He pulls the wax from his ears, hears the siren's song, jumps into the sea, and is instantly torn apart. Soon, another impossible choice awaits them. On one side lies Charybdis, a giant whirlpool capable of swallowing the entire ship. On the other waits Scylla, a monster destined to claim 6 lives. But at the last second, his first officer seizes the helm and turns the ship towards Scylla, believing 6 deaths are better than losing everyone. Seconds later, giant tentacles burst from the cliffs. The ship survives, but it is badly damaged and taking on water, forcing them to stop at a nearby island. There, Odysseus finally tells his men what the prophet Tiresias warned him. If anyone kills the sacred cattle of the sun god, every one of them is doomed. He makes his crew swear they will take only fresh water and fruit, nothing more. Where countless cattle roam freely along the shore. Despite their hunger, the crew keeps its promise, surviving on fruit and water while waiting for the winds to change. But the wind never lets them leave. Days turn into weeks. Their food runs out, while the cattle wander around them untouched. One night, Odysseus notices a strange white figure on a hill. When he investigates, he discovers his starving crew secretly roasting one of the sacred cattle. At sunrise, the wind suddenly dies. Although Odysseus refuses to eat the meat, he knows their fate has already been sealed. As soon as they return to the open sea, both Zeus and Poseidon unleash their fury. Towering waves smash into the ship, the mast snaps in half, the hull breaks apart. The last thing Odysseus remembers is Zeus's lightning splitting the ship in 2 before the sea claims every one of his companions. After the wreck, Calypso finds the unconscious Odysseus washed ashore. For 7 years, she feeds him lotus flowers, clouding his memories and hoping he will stay with her forever. But the spell is fading. Odysseus refuses to eat the flowers any longer, so Calypso finally lets him go. Before he leaves, she places Penelope's jewelry in his hand, triggering the return of his memories. At last, he remembers his wife's name, Penelope. The next morning, Odysseus builds a simple raft and sets sail, trusting the gods to guide him home. When he washes ashore once again, Athena appears and silently shows him the path back to Ithaca. But first, Odysseus must keep one final promise. He must return in disguise, just as Agamemnon warned, or risk suffering the same fate. Before heading to the palace, he visits the home of his old friend Eumaeus.
There, he discovers that Antinous ordered all of Eumaeus's livestock to be slaughtered. Although Odysseus hides his true identity, he learns everything happening in Ithaca, including Antinous's plan to murder Telemachus. At the same time, Telemachus arrives at the temple of Athena to offer a sacrifice.
While his companions wait outside, Nyla priests suddenly murder them from behind. The attack reveals the truth. They are Antinous's men in disguise. Several assassins surround Telemachus, ready to kill him. But before they can strike, an old man wearing tattered robes appears. The mysterious stranger is Odysseus. Still hiding his identity, he introduces himself as Sinon, claiming he once fought beside Odysseus during the Trojan War and has come to repay an old debt. He tells Telemachus that his father is alive and will return soon. His job is to enter the palace first, judge the situation, and see whether there is still a place for Odysseus in his own home. He instructs Telemachus to return to the palace as planned, bringing Menelaus's gifts and announcing that Odysseus will soon arrive. Then, he must hold a feast and invite every suitor. That is how their plan begins. The look on Antinous's face says everything. The moment he sees Telemachus alive, he realizes his assassins have failed. Later, Telemachus privately tells Penelope that the time has come for her to choose a new husband. She is stunned to hear those words from her own son. But Telemachus has a plan. Once Penelope makes her choice, the other suitors will leave, and they will only have to deal with one enemy. That night, the long-awaited feast begins where Queen Penelope is finally expected to choose a new husband. While the suitors gather in the Great Hall, Odysseus quietly enters through the back with Eumaeus. There, he sees his faithful dog Argos one last time. Watching from a distance, Telemachus begins to suspect that the mysterious traveler called Sinon is hiding his true identity. As Odysseus walks among the suitors, he overhears Antinous plotting to murder Telemachus that very night. Without saying a word, Odysseus drops a small lottery stone onto Antinous's plate, the very stone Antinous once used to betray Sinon and send him to war in his place. Antinous instantly loses his temper, grabbing a stool and smashing it across the old man's back. His own followers quickly remind him that attacking a guest violates Zeus' sacred laws of hospitality. "My name is Sinon, the bravest soldier I ever knew at Troy, and he sends his regards." Furious, Antinous beats him again and again until Telemachus orders everyone to stop and arranges for the traveler to meet Queen Penelope.
Still unwilling to reveal himself, Odysseus remains hidden behind a curtain while an elderly servant washes his feet. The moment she removes his sandal, she notices the old scar left by a wild boar years ago. She immediately recognizes her true king. Odysseus gently asks her to keep his identity secret, and she silently agrees. Meanwhile, under the cover of darkness, Antinous sneaks through the palace, preparing to stab Telemachus from behind. At the same time, Odysseus speaks privately with Penelope. He tells her about the horrors of Troy, the rivers of blood, and how the Greeks abandoned every value they once believed in. He assures Penelope that Odysseus is alive and will return when she needs him most. But first, she must keep the promise she once made. Immediately understanding his meaning, Penelope steps into the hall and announces that she is finally ready to choose a husband. She orders all the suitors to return in 2 hours for the ceremony. No weapons will be allowed inside. The mysterious traveler will also be present. He asks only one thing: make sure no one enters the hall carrying a weapon. Telemachus orders the loyal servants to remove every sword and spear from the walls. Unfortunately, one servant, secretly loyal to Antinous, allows him to keep a hidden weapon. When the suitors return, Penelope reveals the final challenge. 12 axe heads are lined up in a perfect row. Whoever can string Odysseus's legendary bow and shoot an arrow cleanly through every axe ring will become the new king of Ithaca and Penelope's husband. One by one, the suitors step forward. None of them can even string the bow. When Telemachus offers it to Antinous, he admits that no man can truly replace Odysseus. He even claims that if he had fought beside him at Troy, he would have died there as well. Of course, it's nothing but another lie. The truth is, Antinous sacrificed Sentina so he could stay safely at home while plotting to seize the throne.
Odysseus has heard enough. He steps out from the back of the hall and reaches for his old bow. The weapon fits perfectly in his hands, as if no time has passed. He turns to flee, but Odysseus's second arrow strikes down the loyal follower trying to shield him. Then the slaughter begins. One after another, every traitor falls beneath Odysseus's arrows. One of the suitors rushes toward the armory, hoping to retrieve more weapons. Telemachus chases him down before he can return and smashes a large vase into his neck. Using the technique Eumaeus taught him, he finishes the fight with a precise strike. Meanwhile, Odysseus battles nearly 40 armed men almost entirely on his own. Even surrounded by spears, no one can bring him down. The surviving suitors finally surrender. Odysseus seizes Antinous, throws him to the ground, and drives his sword into him. Before delivering the final blow, he says, "When you reach Hades, tell my men they have been avenged, and when you meet Serena, repay the debt you owe his family." With Antinous dead, the nightmare is finally over. Odysseus walks toward Penelope, places the pendant he has carried for 20 years into her hand. Penelope fears she is about to lose him again. But Odysseus did not survive 20 years of war, monsters, and angry gods just to die at home. Still, victory comes at a price. Because of the blood he spilled, he must leave Ithaca and live in exile. He asks Penelope to sail with him toward the western horizon. In the film's final moments, Odysseus fulfills his promise. He returns home, only to leave it once more. Sailing into the horizon beside Penelope and his most loyal companions,